Once upon a time, in a forgotten village nestled between crumbling hills and whispering pines, lived a man named Arman. The world had long moved on from his kind. He was 73, with hair as white as the snow-capped peaks beyond his home, and hands hardened by a lifetime of labor. His body was worn, but his eyes, those eyes burned like torches in a storm. People called him Old Arman, not out of disrespect, but because he had lived through eras that were now dust in the wind. Once a blacksmith, once a soldier, once a father, once a husband, his life had been many things. But now, to most, he was simply the relic who wandered the village square, humming forgotten tunes and talking to birds as if they were old friends. No one knew the fire that still burned inside him. No one knew the promise he had made to himself. Because many years ago, standing beside the grave of the woman he loved more than life itself, he had whispered into the wind, "I will not go until I've truly lived. I will not leave this world until I've proven that the soul has no age." The villagers pitied him. They watched as he trained every morning, dragging heavy logs through the forest trails, lifting stones bigger than his chest, punching old sandbags until his knuckles bled. "He's mad," they said. "Why doesn't he rest?" But Arman wasn't trying to prove them wrong. He was trying to prove something to the boy inside him, the boy who once dreamed of climbing mountains, of writing a book, of fighting in arenas not made of steel and fire, but of will and spirit. And then, one spring, everything changed. A notice arrived in the village national endurance competition, a grueling test of strength, resilience, and mental fortitude. The prize? Nothing compared to what Arman sought. It wasn't the trophy he cared for. It was the fire, the battle, the push beyond limits. It was the chance to remind the world, and himself, that the body is merely a vessel. The spirit drives the soul. His neighbors laughed when he applied. "Arman, you'll kill yourself. You'll break your bones. You're too old." But none of that mattered. Because in his heart, he was already at war with time, with doubt, with every voice that ever said, "You can't." The morning of the competition arrived like thunder. Young athletes from all across the country stood at the starting linemen and women in their prime, carved like statues, confident and cocky. And there, in the middle of them, stood Arman, wrinkled, silent, eyes like sharpened steel. Whispers filled the air. Laughter followed. Cameras zoomed in on him for the novelty, an old man among warriors, but no one saw the storm inside him. The first challenge was a mountain run, 12 kilometers of brutal incline, jagged rocks, and suffocating wind. Arman fell behind quickly, his lungs fighting, legs trembling. But he didn't stop. Every step forward echoed with memory. He remembered carrying his child in the dead of winter through blizzards to find medicine. He remembered dragging his wounded comrade across a battlefield when bullets rained like hail. He remembered lifting his wife into bed when her body was too frail to walk. Pain? He had made peace with pain. It wasn't the enemy, it was a companion. By the time he reached the top, he was the last to arrive, but he arrived. Next came the strength test. Atlas stones, tire flips, deadlifts. The young ones roared, showing off, muscles bulging, crowds cheering. Arman stepped forward quietly. He closed his eyes. Remembered every time he rebuilt his house with his bare hands. Every time he moved trees with nothing but rope and grit. Every time he refused to break. He lifted. And though his back screamed, though his arms shook, though his heartbeat echoed like thunder, he didn't stop. Because he wasn't competing with them. He was competing with a voice inside that said, "You're done." One by one, the others began to fade. Some injured, some quit. But Arman kept going. Through obstacle courses, through freezing water, through tunnels and heights and darkness. And finally, it came down to the last event, a test of mental endurance. Locked in silence, blindfolded, surrounded by chaos, they had to sit for hours in absolute stillness while the world tried to shake them. Young minds cracked. Impatience boiled. One after another, they gave up. But not Arman. He sat with the stillness of a mountain because his mind had seen wars. It had endured grief, loneliness, heartbreak, poverty. He had survived decades of silence, of waiting, of holding on. Time passed. Then, silence. When the blindfolds were removed, only Arman remained. The world erupted, but he didn't stand for applause. He simply whispered, "It's never been about age. It's about who you decide to be." When the video of his journey went viral, people called him the Iron Soul, a legend, a symbol of unbreakable will. But to Arman, that wasn't the lesson. The lesson was this: we are told life slows down with age. But what if the only thing slowing us down is belief? The world sees wrinkles and thinks weakness. But what they don't see is the decades of wisdom, of resilience, of silent battles, won in the dark. And the truth is, anyone at any age can awaken the fire within. Because age is a number. Mindset is a choice. Years later, as Arman sat beneath the old oak tree where he used to read to his wife, children gathered around him, young boys and girls who saw him not as old but as strong, as a warrior, as the man who rewrote what it meant to live fully. And before he passed on, before the final sunset painted the sky in gold, Arman left behind a journal. Its last words, written in trembling but steady hand, were these: "To anyone who thinks it's too late, you're wrong. You're not finished. You're just getting started. Age may wrinkle the skin, but the mind, the spirit, the soul, they stay young as long as you let them."